Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you so much for listening. And we have a special episode for you this evening. We have our annual Thanksgiving episode. We are joined by usual co-host, Dusty O'Connell. Dusty, how are you?
I am fantastic. I racked some beer tonight, and it tastes good. It looks happy. There was no errant fungus or bacteria living on top, so...
That's all we can really ask for in life, really.
I'm feeling more successful than Blair Walsh right now.
That is true. Also on the other end of the tin can and string is our analyst and co-host. You know him from Zone Coverage and Optimum Scouting. He is useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, are you doing better than Blair Walsh this evening?
Oh, absolutely. Not that that's a high bar to clear. But yeah.
Blair Walsh was having problems clearing that bar.
Clearing high bars. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
More of a crossbar situation, yeah. Darn shame. Well, welcome to our annual Thanksgiving episode. This is going to be a big one. This is going to cover both the game against the Rams, in which we were victorious this last Sunday, and we are also going to be previewing the Thanksgiving Day game against the Lions with Dusty. So we've got plenty of stuff and a mailbag to get to, and we're looking forward to it. This episode is always fun, and this episode usually involves a lot of takes and a lot of talk about literal turkey and how Arif and Dusty despise it.
And are correct to do so.
I just like everything else better.
Yeah. Despise is such an odd word. We'll talk about it later.
I'm gonna eat turkey on Thanksgiving. In fact, when we get to the Thanksgiving part of the show, which is gratefully for everyone who cares about football at the very end, I will describe how I'm going to eat turkey in possibly every possible preparation.
I was going to say, were you just going to be describing it how you are actually going to physically be eating it? Like you're going to be upside down for part of it? Or like you got those like boots that you hang up from the seat, from like a door frame sort of thing?
I will eat some turkey in a tree. I will eat some turkey on my knees.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I will eat some turkey in this box. I will not eat turkey from a fox. That's unhygienic.
Exactly.
Why would you do such a thing? That would be wrong. So we got plenty of stuff to cover. We've got a veritable Mexican standoff of hosts going on here. So just imagine this is just some sort of Quentin Tarantino movie, and all of this episode that's happening right now is just a flashback to the Mexican standoff happening later in the episode. So we've got plenty of stuff to go through, but before we start, we would like to give a quick shout out to Andrew Mithen, who I assume that's how it's being pronounced, because that's how I'm going to pronounce it, for giving us a nice donation on Patreon. Again, thank you, Andrew. We really do appreciate it. First-time listeners and long-time listeners will note that this show does not have advertisements on it. We just have our little spot at the beginning and a little spot at the end just mentioning, hey, if you would like to donate to the show, if you hear value in what we're doing or what we're saying, you are welcome to donate to the show and help us keep the lights on, help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. You can do it in one of two different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode. That is more of a subscription based. You can do $1 to untold amounts of money per month, and we'd be happy to read a little note from you on the show if you'd like as well. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode if you'd like to just give a one-time donation there. Again, anything you give is appreciated. We just got back from the London game, and your donations really helped with that, and helped with the recorder and all sorts of technology and stuff we've done over the past year. So please keep it up. Please continue. We really do appreciate it. And thank you, Andrew, for helping out. So, all of that aside, Minnesota defeats the Rams in a game that resembled the Washington game for at least the first drive. So I guess the first thing I want to ask Arif is, what is it about the first drive, the last two games, that has led to offensive points for the other team?
I'm not sure. You talked to Zimmer about it, and he seems largely unconcerned, which makes sense because overall it hasn't been so impactful throughout games that they've lost a ton because of it. Some people have asked him like, hey, are you just kind of feeling out what the defense is doing? And then you make a mistake, but you've got to handle what they're doing. And he goes, no, which would be such a convenient excuse that would explain like why the first drive is so different from all the other drives. But that's evidently not what's happening. These scripted drives from opponents just seem to flow a little bit better. Maybe it's because scripted drives tend to remove the likelihood that you're going to play to your tendencies, your 3rd and 11 tendencies, your 1st and 10 tendencies, that you just kind of play according to what the script says, and that maybe makes it difficult for defenses, and especially the Vikings defense, which relies a lot on being able to read the receivers throughout the routes. It might create some issues there, but I'm not really sure what the whole of it is, because a lot of people will say, oh, it's because the scripted drives at the beginning, but that's not a great answer, because like not every team is scoring on the first drive. They happen to be scoring more against the Vikings on the first drive, and I kind of want to know why specifically it's with a good defense like the Vikings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have a great answer. All I know is that probably part of it is the Vikings have some difficulty dealing with those scripted drives early on.
I feel like the answer of scripted drives is more of a how and less of a why.
Yeah, it gets you partway to the answer for sure, but it definitely doesn't get you where you want to be if you want to diagnose and solve the problem.
No. So it was an interesting first drive where Keenum showed, not Case Keenum, but the Rams showed that they were able to just march up and down the field. Hey, we're the number one offense in football. And then the rest of the game happened, and there was an interesting stat that came out from Sam Ekstrom on Twitter, who said that the Rams came in with 7 straight games rushing for over 100 yards. They got a season-low 45 today, and the Vikings rushed for a season-high 171. We managed to stop them every place we could. Was there something discernible between the first drive and the rest of the game?
Yeah, well, I think that part of it was that the Vikings were certainly much more aggressive in this game throughout, all of the other drives with what they were willing to do with their safeties, cornerbacks, and linebackers in attacking the passing game. That's a big part of what was different about that. In terms of stopping the run, I think part of it is that like literally the linebackers didn't play as awfully throughout the rest of the game. They still actually, I think that aside from their blitz responsibilities, the linebackers actually had a really, really poor game. But they were certainly the worst of their performance in that first drive. They got single blocked up by guards that allowed the Rams to just kind of walk the ball into the end zone. And from there, some of it, Linval Joseph was able to soak up some more blockers and stuff like that. That played a role in allowing the linebackers to kind of free up. But I think a lot of it has to do with just how unusual it is the Vikings did get their tackles for loss. It didn't usually come, from Eric Kendricks, who I think got 1 or 2, or Anthony Barr, who didn't get any. It instead came from like Terrence Newman and Mackenzie Alexander, like slot cornerbacks, who are asked to show up a lot in the run game, but not everyone's Antoine Winfield. Very often slot cornerbacks don't do a very good job, even though that's kind of one of their primary responsibilities as replacing the third linebacker. But instead, we saw plays by like Linval Joseph, Tom Johnson, Stephen Weatherly, and Tashawn Bauer both did a good job stopping the run throughout the rest of the game. And I was kind of surprised to see both of them as often as I did, because with Brian Robinson out, you kind of expect we're going to see a larger rotation of Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin, and instead we saw kind of a good rotation of those backup defensive ends who were both very good in stopping the run. We didn't see them on the first drive. Maybe they also played a role. Who knows? I just find it kind of interesting that the Vikings had such a great defensive performance throughout the rest of the game. Like you said, being one of the first teams, or if not the first team, to hold the Rams to under 100 rushing yards, for the first time in 8 games throughout the season, without a great run defense performance from either the linebackers or the defensive ends. I guess a lot of it just has to do with what the interior defensive tackles did and what the backup defensive ends did, and surprisingly, what the cornerbacks were able to do, and not necessarily Trey Waynes either. Now Vikings fans are getting kind of accustomed to, there's a good run defense from the cornerback, probably Trey Waynes, and in this case, not really. There's a lot of really good run defense performance from both of the slot cornerbacks. We saw a little bit from Xavier Rhodes, and we saw a lot from Anthony Harris and Harrison Smith.
And this was without Sendejo, and this was without Robinson back there, which I suppose we could flip over to the pass game, and just the fact that we were able to get so much pressure on the Rams. It was really nice to see, and he just had his tight end to really be able to throw to for a while.
Yeah, no, for sure. They just didn't do a very good job adapting to the way the Vikings blitzed. So before, when we had Joe McAdee on to talk about the Rams preview, he mentioned that Jared Goff is doing fine under pressure, kind of generally speaking, but against the blitz where you see more exotic looks, you have to throw quicker, maybe pressure's not there, but something confusing is he's not doing a very good job. And he asked if the Vikings had blitzed a lot. I thought they had. Dusty pointed out that they actually had blitzed less often this year than they had in any of their years under Zimmer. And so we just kind of assumed, it's not as if this is a philosophy. They may blitz more often in this game, and they absolutely did. The Vikings have not blitzed their cornerbacks that often this year in particular. They've only had 10 pass rushing snaps from all of their cornerbacks heading into the game. And in this game, they were very aggressive about those cornerback blitz. We saw at least 3 of them, if not more, throughout the game. There were 37, I guess technically 36 pass attempts from Keenum, and well over 40% had pressure. A lot of that came from cornerbacks. A lot of that came from blitzes from linebackers. We saw Eric Hendricks and Anthony Barr both put pressure on the quarterback, which was really good to see. And once again, we actually didn't see that much pressure from Hunter or Griffin, but we saw a decent amount of pressure from Weatherly and Bauer. We saw a good amount of pressure from Linval Joseph. We saw Tom Johnson push the pocket. And I think we even saw a safety blitz here or there that was able to create pressure. Kind of an unusual way to generate that pressure, but a lot of it was designed to create confusing looks through blitzes than it was to, just make the quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket. And certainly we saw a lot of really creative defensive design in this game that I don't think we've seen for the Vikings in a while. Not that anyone would accuse the Vikings defense of being uncreative, but they don't tend to do this. This is kind of what we've seen from the Cardinals in the past couple of years, kind of what we've seen from like the good version of the Rob Ryan defenses, like the 1 year he had with the Saints and stuff like that, and less what we see with Mike Zimmer. So that was kind of cool to see, and certainly something that our guest on the previous show, Joe McAdee, had called happening, which was kind of cool.
So Jared Goff, it didn't look like he was being very efficient. Robert Woods and Sammy Watkins, 11 catches total, just a little bit over 115 yards. Was this a situation of Goff hearing footsteps and the pass rush getting to him, or was this a result of the corners doing work?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the pressure and the blitzes that the Vikings organized. But I think that, it's important to recognize, Sammy Watkins, I think he only had 2 catches out of those. So the rest actually must have come from Robert Woods, 2 or 3. But yeah, it was interesting. We asked before, who's the number 1 receiver? It seems like it's Robert Woods. He's getting most of the targets. He's getting, a good deal of the receptions. And, he mentioned that Sammy Watkins is probably the best receiver on the roster, and that Xavier Rhodes should be covering him. And that's what happened. Xavier Rhodes did a pretty good job blanketing Watkins. Had 1 catch, I think, on the first drive, and then for the rest of the game seemed mostly completely blanketed and ineffective. So you had Trey Waynes and Robert Woods a lot. And aside from some in-breaking routes where Waynes gave up quite a bit, he did pretty well until the final drive where they kept targeting him and he picked up a bunch of meaningless coverage yardage. It was a really good game, I think, from him. And I think this is the 3rd or 4th game in a row where we've said, hey, Trey Waynes is playing really, really well. And it's kind of interesting, we're not saying that anymore of Xavier Rhodes, not necessarily because Rhodes hasn't been playing well over the past 4 weeks, although I would argue, kind of not up to his usual standard as much, but he just hasn't been targeted very much. They keep targeting Waynes, and Waynes is doing a better and better job on those targets. And so I would say that I would be inclined to say that this is part of that, where where Waynes is continuing to show up. He still, made some mistakes, but it certainly didn't feel like, the Trey Waynes of last year or even early this season, where those mistakes would happen pretty constantly and he would end up being a liability. It wasn't until garbage time that it really felt like Waynes was actually being, abused, and it doesn't matter at that point. It's garbage time. There were a couple of catches here and there where he felt like he could have done better. But yeah, I think that the cornerbacks, locked up pretty well, but I think part of that is because they didn't have to do it for very long, given how quickly that pressure was arriving on those blitzes. So I think, it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah, and according to the stat line, he was only hit 5 times. So it's not like we were getting to him every time, but we were definitely collapsing the pocket around him.
Yeah, for sure. Because, there was there 1 sack? No, there were 2 sacks, right? Yeah, 2 sacks and 5 hits. One of them, I think, taken away. I don't know if they count those hits when the penalty takes them away. I don't know. ESPN's box score is sometimes pretty weird. There was another one where Anthony Barr, had, in my opinion, a legal quarterback hit, and that was turned into a penalty because the judge who couldn't see the hit thought it was a helmet-to-helmet when it wasn't.
Isn't this the second or the third time this has happened in consecutive weeks that Anthony Barr has been called for a hit on a quarterback that it appeared to be legal and received the flag on the play?
Yeah, I think so. And then I think there was a Linval Joseph one earlier in the season too. It's
one of those
getting frustrating.
Yeah, it's we're not calling it profiling, but it's starting to become a pattern, if nothing else.
Yeah, and it's not as if Anthony Barr has developed a reputation for being a dirty player or anything like that.
No, not at all.
Don't matter at all.
If you're not following Anthony Barr on Twitter, you really should be, because every day he sends out...
Oh my God.
He sends out 1 or 2 tweets, or he retweets a couple of people who are sending him just awful off to him, and it's just great. It's just entertaining.
It's so good. It's so good.
So, it's odd that it seems to just keep happening, but I suppose if a team is going to be hitting the quarterback like we do, it's going to be, you make an omelet, you break a couple of eggs, but it just seems...
it's the cost of doing business.
Cost of doing business sort of thing.
I think this is the sort of thing, though. So something that people don't quite know about the NFL referee process, they think that there's no accountability or anything like that. Referees do get graded every game afterwards by not the NFLRA, but whatever part of the actual league office deals with officials. So like the VP of officiating, gets involved with that. And in those grades and reviews, they do tell them like, hey, you got this call kind of wrong, or hey, this is an ambiguous call that you called one way. Probably don't call it that way. Usually they'll just tell the refs when they got it wrong, but they do receive grades, and those grades determine who gets playoff assignments and Super Bowl assignments. And I wouldn't be surprised if that Anthony Barr play does end up in one of those reviews for the refs. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this is not a long running thing. Like it's not kind of like Vontez Burfict thing. I think it might just be like these things happen sometimes, and they happen to the same player sometimes a couple of times. So I don't think that'll continue. So
let's move on to Case Keenum, and he is
never heard of him.
Never once. Case Keenum wins again, and is still getting bailed out by his receivers. The one play in particular, which you could argue was either an incredibly dumb move or a moment of sheer brilliance, was his drop back and tossing it up in the air in the general area that Adam Thielen was at, so Adam Thielen could grab it. Is this just the situation that we're going to have for the rest of Keenum's stint here, that he'll have a couple plays during a game and you go, man, Keenum's really just going great out there, but have like just enough plays where all the Teddy detractors are like, yeah, but look at this is exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. Like,
Yeah, it really feels like we're just getting a series of games where Case is proving sort of the highest of his upside and the lowest of his downside.
Every game!
It's just we're just going through game by game by game. We're just like, oh, this is exhausting. But
we are on this roller coaster.
Yeah, we absolutely are, and it's really annoying. You just like him to have like a clean game in one direction or the other and help kind of like clear up and create a clear picture.
Against the team
it's
that's
kind of
not
funny.
The Bucks.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, is one bad loss like maybe that's worth it to throw? Who knows? But I'm not advocating the Vikings lose. I'm just saying there may be a silver lining to a catastrophic quarterback game. But it does seem
Tell
like...
Tell that to Buffalo.
Yeah,
Whatever, I've already got the game picked out. If Case Keenum has a terrible game against Atlanta, I think that would be a pretty easy spot to slip Teddy in. But that's neither here nor there.
It's pretty late in the season. But, I've already said that I don't think it takes quarterbacks that long to shake off the rust, so I'm not that worried about that. But yeah, in this game, a lot of people came away from this game saying, well, it's Case's team now, he's earned the right to start. And then, Mike Zimmer is like, yeah, we'll see what happens. He's not committed to Keenum, and there's like this whole thing. So a lot of Vikings, Twitter's been talking about it. I'm sure Vikings fans have been talking about it in general too, off of Twitter. But you go to NFL Network, you go to CBS, NBC, and the talking point is they should just name Case the starter for the rest of the season. So they've picked up on the fact that Mike Zimmer has only been naming Case the starter week by week, and they're like, well, just settle the locker room. And I get it.
Really manufactured controversy.
Right. Like, I understand, like, kind of, like, why you would think it makes sense to have long-term security at who you think the quarterback is, but, like, it like, clearly is not born out of any actual information that's coming out of the Vikings locker room, because they seem pretty content with the whole thing.
Just a couple of weeks ago, like the perception outside of anyone that like pays close attention to the Vikings is that Teddy Bridgewater is being like frozen in carbonite, when the reality is he's there every week.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And he's drawn so much support from the locker room that if they were to switch to him, I think not very much the locker room would be that upset. But if they kept it with Case Keenum, I also think the locker room wouldn't be that much upset either. Fans are not the only ones that like evaluate quarterbacks in terms of wins. A lot of players evaluate quarterbacks in terms of wins, and they're on the field affecting play. And so they see a quarterback, they think hey, we're winning. Why rock the boat? It's fine. The Vikings players are going to trust whatever the coaches decide to do, and the coaches have decided they're just going to sort of ride the knife's edge here and see what comes of it. That's fine. I get it. Last week I said after the Washington game that Case had played horribly enough in the second half and spectacularly enough in the first half that he deserves presumption in a quarterback battle throughout the week, and I thought that they should split reps and have a genuine battle. That, of course, didn't happen. They named the Case the starter essentially right away, technically on Wednesday, but earlier in real life. And in this week, it's more difficult because he didn't have as bad of a bad part to his game in this Rams game, and his good throws were pretty good still. So not as good actually as the Washington good throws, which also funny. But it's I still think that there should be a clear sort of like split reps quarterback competition. This is maybe not the week to do it because it's a short week. Play Case against the Lions on Thanksgiving, whatever. But just generally, I think that give Teddy time to work with the ones and then pick the best competitor out of those two. And I think Case has kind of earned presumption in that battle. But I don't think that he's earned sort of the long-term starter role because it's very clear that the Vikings are aware of, like what James was saying, that receivers are kind of bailing him out in a lot of situations. You could say that Adam Thielen throw where Case Keenum got out of like 3 different potential sacks to throw it up. You could say, that's a good example. But, I think there are other examples throughout the game. Less in this game than, in a bunch of other games that we've seen. The last Lions game is a good example. But
There were at least 2 Rudolph catches in this game that you just looked at and go, if his fingers were just an inch shorter, that wouldn't be a catch.
Yeah, well, one of those Rudolph catches, I'm actually willing to just be okay with that because, well, before the game, evidently, when Case was talking to the broadcasters, he had mentioned this. Like, he had mentioned that when Rudolph is the first read and the linebacker's back is turned, he's going to throw it exactly where he ended up throwing it during the game. And you're like, well, okay, that's a decision that he clearly made with full knowledge of like the risks that entails. So okay, I'll give credit to Keenum for one of those. But
I just imagine Case Keenum talking to the announcers and being like, "I prefer to throw my balls just outside of the range or just inside of the range of what's humanly possible for a human hand to catch."
The more spectacular it looks on their end, the more I think I'm giving them money. And really, isn't that my job to make them look good?
I'm just trying to make sure that Adam Thielen and everybody else just gets paid this offseason.
But it isn't really everybody else. It's primarily Thielen and Rudolph, and to a lesser extent, David Morgan.
Yeah, I guess David Morgan. Yeah, he's been pretty hot. The thing that was maybe most amazing was when Kyle Rudolph prevented an interception by knocking away just this terrible throwaway ball at the line of scrimmage.
Clutch.
Yeah, fantastic. That is worth 45 yards of field position on average. Like, fantastic. That's pretty good, dude. Very athletic move by that tight end. But yeah, I would say that the Case has certainly earned the Detroit game because it's a short week, and I'm still not sure that he's earned kind of this long-term whatever you get to be the starter. Because if he plays well from week to week, everyone knows that he's going to continue being the quarterback. Because if he doesn't get benched after the Washington game, where he puts up good statistics but has really iffy play in a win, then I don't see why a game with a lower downside of play like the Rams game would be enough to bench him. So if they keep winning, they'll probably keep sticking with him, whatever. And everyone's kind of fine with that. So yeah, we rode the roller coaster again. That happens.
Well, but how will we silence all the Teddy Bridgewater lovers if we don't put Teddy in when we're already down by 3 scores and maybe a quarter and a half left and we don't win?
I do think that Teddy's victory formation would have been nicer than Case Keenum's.
It would have been, but do you really want to put his knee at risk like that?
Keep Teddy alive. Seriously.
One other thing we want to mention is the offensive line once again did not give up a sack for Keenum. This is how many games in a row is this that we haven't given up a sack?
I don't actually know how many games in a row it is, but certainly the offensive line is doing pretty spectacularly. I think Case Keenum overall this season has only been sacked 5 times? And some of it has to do with his mobility. Like I think that plays a role. Obviously, he avoided a sack entirely on his own on that Adam Thielen throw. But a lot of it I think just has to do with the offensive design. Is getting the ball out quicker against teams that are more likely to generate pressure, which is a really nice adaptive offensive design. We've seen longer developing, deeper throws against teams that have struggling defensive lines, and we've seen quicker, shorter throws against teams that have better offensive lines. The ball is getting out quick, and it means that the pass rush doesn't have time to get there. But also, we saw some really spectacular play. I think, in particular, from Rashad Hill, who I think only allowed 1 hurry in this game. Certainly, he's been pretty fantastic. We saw some pretty good play from Berger. But yeah, I want to say that they still did get blowed up a little by Aaron Donald. He had a really good game. And then Robert Quinn, who was struggling throughout most of the season, also ended up having a pretty good game. So some of it has to do with Case Keenum. Some of it has to do with offensive design. But at some points you could say, yeah, the offensive line once again did a pretty great job. There's still, a top half of the league offensive line in terms of pass protection, which is it's just stunning to me that that's the case.
For what it's worth, it has been 2 games since Case Keenum was sacked. They got him once in London. And then I think he had another 2 games sackless.
Yeah, it's been multiple games in the season, but it hasn't been one straight shot then. Yeah, I think it's 4 games total that the Vikings have not given up a sack this year.
It could be even more.
I just envision Sam Bradford from last year going out here and going, wow, I have time. I can press down on the Pop-Tart on the toaster and just wait. It's great. I have actual time to sit here and do stuff.
Do that.
It's like, I have time to think. Before we are finished talking about the game, there are just a couple more things I want to mention. Adam Thielen. We had a couple of questions in, and since we had about 4 questions on this, I just want to put this
He's
out.
from Minnesota.
Yeah, I hear.
Did you know he was undrafted free agent? He had to pay to be in his own combine?
I hear he had a $500 scholarship for college, and that's it.
I heard he wanted to play college basketball.
Salesman?
And you want to be my latex salesman. Adam Thielen, number 1 receiver, or is it just a meaningless designation at this point?
Yeah, so I saw this question a couple of times, and yeah, that's what I would say, is that it's a kind of a meaningless designation. They do have, their share of roles. It's Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, and it's pretty clear. Early in the season, Diggs was taking over more games than Thielen was, and was more critical to the nature of the success the Vikings had, and more recently, of course, Adam Thielen's been taking over, and so you're kind of like, well, who's the better between the two? And I suppose, there's better evidence to say that Adam Thielen's the better between the two. Statistical evidence for sure. His ability to get open, further downfield, as well as, maintain a catch radius that gives quarterbacks a lot of latitude, whether that's, Bradford or Keenum or Bridgewater, that's certainly good evidence. It's still intuitively to me, I would say Stephon Diggs is the quote unquote the better receiver, is like on film and stuff like that. But if you have this argument that Adam Thielen's the better receiver, fine. Like if you feel strongly about it, you feel strongly about it. I don't. The fact that they have different roles doesn't designate one as quote unquote wide receiver 1 and the other one is wide receiver 2. We're seeing more and more top-end receivers go into the slot. Adam Thielen plays in the slot a lot. And so, people used to think that you couldn't have wide receiver 1s that play in the slot. I remember back when Victor Cruz was good, he had mentioned that, he sees himself as a top 10 receiver in the league or a top 5 receiver in the league. And a bunch of other, receivers were asked about this, and he was like, you can't. He plays in the slot. He can't be a top 10 receiver. And now that's no longer the case. We see Larry Fitzgerald playing in the slot a lot. We saw Calvin Johnson playing the slot a while back. Back when Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey were with the Bears, one of them would slip into the slot. We're seeing, really good receivers hang out as slot receivers for a while, and Adam Thielen's one of those. But if you're, the kind of person that thinks wide receiver 1 is a very particular meaning, you probably also think that receiver is not often in the slot, and he is. So the roles that they play are fairly different. But I don't think that they're different in a way that categorizes one as wide receiver 1 and one as wide receiver 2. I personally think Diggs is the better receiver, but there seems to be more evidence that Thielen is the better receiver. Yeah. That's a cool problem to have.
That's one of those good problems.
Yeah.
This question is a silly one for Vikings fans to argue about, but it makes a lot more sense if you're a fan of an opposing team who's trying to figure out, or if you were, say, a defensive coordinator of a team that's about to play the Vikings, then it's much more suitable to have that argument. So I think I already know your answer, but if you were gifted perfect Xavier Rhodes, Rhodes closed, 100% performance for one game, and you were the opposing coach of a team that was about to play the Vikings, would you put him on Diggs or Thielen?
If Diggs is completely healthy and the quarterback is like a nameless, faceless entity that, always throws to the best option, Diggs. Against the current iteration of Diggs and Thielen with Case Keenum throwing the ball, Thielen.
Thielen's just too hot to ignore right now. He's so
hot right now.
Yeah, there we go.
The worst.
Latavius Murray. It turns out this trade was a good idea, or the signing anyway was a good idea. Murray, I think we consider him healthy, and I think we consider him to be a beast in the backfield. What's making him so successful right now?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how well he's reading the the holes that are being opened up by the offensive line, which is great. The fact that the offensive line is creating these clear running lanes that, give running backs the opportunity to create and do damage, which is, so unusual, I think, as a Vikings fan. I think we're becoming accustomed to it, and so is Murray. A big part of how he's playing has to do with his vision. He's been playing a little bit lower, so when he takes on contact, it seems to be a little bit more effective, which is nice. One of the biggest criticisms that we heard from Raiders people when the Vikings signed him was that he runs too high. He's like 6'1", right? Really tall for a running back. And he runs with a lot of power, but a lot of it gets taken away by how high he runs. It seems like thus far, over the past couple of games, he is running a little bit lower. I think that's only a small part of the equation. And the health, I think, plays a pretty significant role. His ankle has fully healed up, which makes him look a little bit more explosive in short bursts. Clearly, he still doesn't have long speed, but he certainly has enough to occasionally get like a 23-yard run. But I feel like he's kind of been playing like this for a while. It just gets kind of swallowed up in the situations that he's been in, or how well the offensive line has been blocking for him. And he hadn't been doing as well statistically, but I think he's been playing to this level for a little bit. We had a couple of questions, more than a couple of weeks ago. I want to say like week 5 or 6 or 7, where people were like, why are they still giving Latavius Murray the ball? And I thought he played fine, and he just happened to average 2 yards a carry, and now he's doing more. And I think he's kind of playing within himself. Still, it's kind of like the Jericho McKinnon thing when he had 10 carries for like 2 yards a carry, then he blew up for like 5 yards a carry for the next 3 games. He's the same running back. It's the same thing with Latavius Murray. I think he's fine. And so I don't think anything new has really happened that substantially changed his game, but if you do watch for new stuff, I would say he does look a little bit quicker initially anyway, and he does look like he's running with his pads a little bit lower, but I don't think those have a significant impact yet, or as significant an impact as one would think.
Well, I think schematically too, the Vikings and Shermer in particular have kind of gotten used to how to fit him into their scheme. I mean, I know that was one of the jokes that you and I made to each other at the Browns game. Was, oh look, it's third down back Latavius Murray going for 3.5 yards on second down. Like, uncharacteristic. In the 2 games since then, we've seen him do more and more, uncharacteristic things for a third down goal line back, because they can open up holes for him, and maybe he has adjusted his run technique a little bit. But whatever they're doing, I think it's working. And I had been singing his praises before we signed him. So,
all right, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that played a role too, because it certainly seems like he has to cut back a lot less in order to find the lane that opens up for him, because one of the issues that we have is he doesn't really have an amazing change of direction. And so if the cutback lane is like 3 lanes back, he's probably not going to get there in time. And I wouldn't be surprised if the running game schematically is adjusted so that it can better take care of his strengths.
So, before we talk about the thing that no one wants to talk about, which is the kicking game, I want to mention the most important play of the game, which I felt was the fumble at the 1 that we popped out and we were able to recover. What happened on that play, and kind of walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, so Anthony Harris was in man coverage on, Cooper Kupp, I think, was the receiver.
Yes.
And it was an interesting look, right? Because the Vikings, when they were in nickel, they very rarely go in dime, and so they decided to have Anthony Harris on top of the receiver with a single high safety in the red zone. Like, it's so unusual because very often you'll see 2 high safety and zone coverage in the red zone. Because on a compressed field, it's a lot easier to look at the quarterback and cover more space. You don't have to worry about covering behind you, and so you don't have to worry about your zones getting too stretched out. But that doesn't always happen. So it looked like here the Vikings were creating a pressure package because they knew it would be a passing situation for the Rams for whatever reason, and because that they did play a little off, And Cooper Kupp, he shook free of Harris, which makes sense. It's a wide receiver who'd been doing pretty well early in the year, especially by virtue of his route running. Anthony Harris is a safety who's played very little cornerback at his time in Virginia, and so he was able to get the ball, and Harris closed down on him pretty quickly. Eric Kendricks was coming from the other side, and he stripped the ball. It's pretty incredible stuff that. He had the capability to do that because the way that he got rid of the ball is he actually had to reach around through the back and get to the ball to the other side, and he still poked it out and he was able to recover it. Really great athletic feat, fantastic quick thinking, and very, very difficult to do. Part of the reason that I had mentioned after the game on my Facebook Live recap that one could argue, right, that the Vikings, score differential over the Rams in that game could have been even larger. It was like, a 24-7 game? Could have been, a 30-7 game or something like that because of the two missed kicks. But that's not quite fair because the Vikings did let the Rams go all the way to the one before they forced a turnover, which in part I think has a lot to do with luck and less to do with like a repeatable defensive skill. And so, it could have been, 24-14 game or whatever. But the play itself was, like you said, the most impactful. I mean, plays rarely net a 7-point swing in terms of expected points from field position. You have the ball at the one, it's essentially 7 points. Turnover there is just massive.
So we get a little bit of fumble luck, and we manage to win the game. The thing that we are going to have to talk about once again, hopefully briefly, is the kicking game and the two mixed field goals from Kai Forbath. Are we again in a situation where we're worried about the kicker? I feel like I could look at the show notes from any number of games this year and just kind of go back. Should we just, when Blair Walsh gets kicked out of Seattle in the next 48 hours, should we just sign him for the Seattle game? Is that what we should do?
I think we're fine. I think Kai Forbath is fine. One of them was a 48-yard field goal. Everyone has begun to take those as a given, and they're not. 50-yard field goals, they don't sink. I don't think they even sink 70% of the time. So 48-yard field goal, that's not always going to happen. It's the other one that's really annoying because that one's a little bit more automatic when it comes to kicking. But those things will happen. Forbath, no one was mistaking him for a Pro Bowl kicking candidate.
No one. Absolutely no one.
So yeah, he missed him. He made the extra points though, so props to him.
Okay, so just for fun, according to the win probability graph on Pro Football Reference, which we've talked about win probability as being kind of silly, but the only two notable decreases that are highlighted by PFR are the two missed field goals. And the 39-yard field goal that he missed in the third quarter has the same negative effect on the Vikings' win performance as that 1-yard fumble recovery had positively.
Yeah, okay. That's a bit much. But the 39-yard one was way later, right?
Yeah, that was... We had battled our way up to having maybe a 2-1 chance to win the game, and then that functionally disappeared when the game was tied 7-7, and we just kind of bungled that drive.
Yeah.
Well, win probability gets exaggerated the later you are in games, so I guess that's probably why. From an expected points perspective, I imagine that fumble was significantly more important. But from a win probability perspective, later in the games, that's what happens.
I will never get over how lovely Minnesotan and passive-aggressive the cheering and throwing the babies up in the air that happens when when eventually he does make the extra point and the whole place just goes nuts.
That was so funny.
It's like the liberation of France. The whole place, yeah.
You did it once.
You did it! Good job! Well, that is going to be it for discussing the victory over the Rams. And now, Dusty is going to be talking more about the Lions game preview. Hey, Dusty.
Hey, James. If you are commuting to work, I'm sorry. You're probably not going to get anything done this week. That's fine. The Vikings won't really either, or the Lions, given the short week. We're going to be too busy resting all our starters. But if you'd like to save the last, I guess, honestly, given the mailbag, last 2/3 of this show for later, then now would be a great time to pause. And we're back. I enjoy doing that. Just a quick note. If you believe that this show is worth anything to you, like our friend Andrew Mithun did last week, then you can become a recurring contributor to Norse Code by going to patreon.com/Norse Code, contributing in any dollar amount that you desire, or you can just throw a few bucks in the tip jar at paypal.me/Norse Code. Think of us over here slaving over hot microphones this holiday season. So, the Lions game was probably the most frustrating and difficult to watch performance for me when it happened in week 4. And not just for the Dalvin Cook injury. It seemed like we just were not firing on, and maybe it's better in retrospect, but it just seems like we were not really firing on any cylinders. What was your general sense of that?
Yeah, well, it was probably Keenum's second worst game. If we exclude the second half of the Washington game. And I think a lot of it has to do with, how good, Glover Quinn and Darius Slay are, and how poorly it seemed like the Vikings had prepared for the game, and just sort of everything. Like, the game situation was off because they couldn't stop the run, and so the Lions were able to, get ahead. I guess frustrating is maybe the best word for it, because it really felt like there was no recourse, right? Because Dalvin Cook had just gotten injured, and everyone, had pretty low opinions of both McKinnon and Murray at that point. Sam Bradford was still not re-healthy, and you felt kind of like the Pittsburgh or the Pittsburgh game wasn't too far off, and no one really trusted the Tampa Bay game results yet, and so everyone was, just waiting for Case to stop being the quarterback, which weeks later seems silly. I think part of it is just it felt hopeless because we knew what the problems were. Hey, the quarterbacks, plural, are injured. The running back is injured, and there's just nothing you can do about it. But some of it's also, it feels like the Vikings defense just in general just doesn't match up well to what the Lions often try to do offensively.
Well, that is frightening because on a short week, Mackenzie Alexander has not practiced yet. Xavier Rhodes has not practiced yet. Brian Robeson has not practiced yet. And Everson Griffin was a light participant in practice. And he was also a somewhat light participant in the game on Sunday, which I think is, you talked about that in the recap, less of an issue than it was earlier in the season. We were able to rotate people in that matched up pretty well against the Rams. But Andrew Sendejo was a limited participant, and everyone else made the grade. Do you find this richness of injury disturbing?
Not particularly. One clarification: the Vikings, nobody technically practiced. The Vikings had to release an injury report projecting who would have missed had they practiced. I think part of it is. It's a short week, and if you generally did hold practice on Mondays, you'd have more people not practicing. So that doesn't bother me as much. I expect Xavier Rhodes will be back. It sounded like Zimmer wasn't too concerned about him. Sendejo, I think he'll be back. If he's not, Anthony Harris playing pretty well. The last 2 games that he had to play for Sendejo have been great. It's certainly a big turnaround over last year, and he may even have an inside track to the starting job, which would be great. That's not as concerning. Everson Griffin, like you said, wasn't that great against the Rams, but I expect he'll be sort of fully recovered by Thursday because it's just taken some time, but he'll be fine. It's not that concerning to me, but it is an intimidating looking injury report for sure.
So they will take full practice on Tuesday and Wednesday up until game day.
I assume. I'm not sure, but yeah, I assume.
And by they, I mean the teams and not necessarily every single player. But It would be more worthwhile to wait for the Wednesday injury report than to forecast from a Monday.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's one of the things with these short week games and why players consistently hate them is that you do get less injury recovery time, and so you're just less likely to play players that you otherwise would have played on a full week. So yeah, we'll see. The players that practice on Wednesday are almost certainly going to be the indicator, because I don't think there's going to be a single do not practice Wednesday where they end up playing on Thursday. But yeah, it's difficult to forecast just because it came immediately after a game. I'm a little bit worried about Mackenzie Alexander, but given the way Terrence Newman played, it's not a huge deal.
Well, I think you can say that, this many weeks later, whatever it is, 7 weeks later, about the rest of the Vikings. I mean, the Lions in week 4 in our house were able to just send Amir Abdullah through the defensive line, and he was able to finish the game with 94 yards. I feel like that is much less likely this time around.
Yeah, it seems like the Lions' offensive line is playing really poorly. Amir Abdullah is just not racking up yards. I think over the last 3 or 4 games, he averaged 2.7 yards per attempt. And in general, they're just doing a really poor job. I mean, if you head over to Pride of Detroit, which is the Detroit Lions SB Nation blog, there's a post there that specifically talks about, how poorly the front seven are doing. They have a lot of issues with who they've got playing on the edge. Cornelius Washington, in particular, is a point of concern. Jared Davis, their rookie linebacker, has been playing really poorly in run support. Just in general, they kind of hate what their offensive line is doing. They hate what their defensive line is doing. The trench play overall in Detroit seems to have decreased. Ricky Wagner is still playing well as a run blocking offensive lineman, but the rest. I mean, I guess TJ Lang is playing kind of well, but the rest of the offensive line just seems to be giving things up, and so. I expect, especially the way Linval Joseph is playing and how well the Vikings have been able to defend on the edge, I expect that Amir Abdullah just won't be having as good of a game. We're going to need to see more from Anthony Barr and Eric Hendricks, but I would expect that we're not going to see as riotous of a game from Abdullah as we normally do.
Well, and if you agree that the Week 4 Detroit offensive line played better than it has for most of the season, and that the Vikings defensive line played worse than most of the season, then there's got to be an accounting for Matt Stafford getting away with as few picks as he ended up with and as few fumbles as he ended up with, or at least ones that the Vikings recovered.
Yeah, no, the part of the frustrating part of that Lions game was how many chances the Vikings had that they didn't take. I had great turnovers, but over the past couple of weeks, Matthew Stafford's been playing better. So the line has been playing worse. The running backs have been playing worse. Matthew Stafford's been playing a little bit better. One thing that we expected going into the season was that the Detroit Lions would be playing a very short strike, quick strike passing offense where they get a lot of yards after the catch from Golden Tate and in Marvin Jones, and right now their other receivers like are TJ Jones and Kenny Golladay, and that's not really the case. There's some arguments that people are having, some like smart people like Mike Tanier at Bleacher Report and Football Outsiders, and some people are Pro Football Focus that are talking about how Matthew Stafford might have one of the deadliest deep passing games in the NFL right now, which is not something that we expected from last year. A lot of that has to do with how Kenny Golladay has been doing deep downfield. A lot of it has to do with how Marvin Jones, especially over the past 3 weeks, has been doing deep downfield. And Golden Tate is still, Golden Tate. He's still, a yak-oriented receiver. But while last year the Detroit Lions were like second or third in yards after the catch, or as a percentage of total receiving yards, they're now in the middle of the NFL. And in fact, they've had more deep passing attempts over the past 3 or 4 weeks, and so it is a bit of a different offense than we saw in Week 4, we saw last year. And that might be a good thing for the Vikings, because a poor offensive line with a deep strike offense is exactly what the Vikings want to play against, because they do a pretty good job at preventing explosive plays, at preventing deep passes, not having to worry about quickness and yards after the catch with 2 cornerbacks that are pretty stiff. Trey Waynes and Xavier Rhodes have done a good job this year of preventing yards after the catch, but with a player like Golden Tate, you're always a little bit worried. But if they continue with this deep passing offense, players like Marvin Jones, it really gives more opportunities for players like Harrison Smith and either Sendeo or Anthony Harris to shine. With a weak offensive line and a little bit more time before throwing, which the Lions were first or second in the league in terms of getting the ball out quickly last year. Now they're in the middle of the pack again. It's like a standard boring offense. But with a weak offensive line, it really gives an opportunity for Everson Griffin and Daniel Hunter to put pressure on, and Tom Johnson to come up the middle, and Linval Joseph to stop things. So it's kind of an interesting comparison, because I think over the past couple, Matthew Stafford's statistics haven't been like all that great, but there's people saying, he's playing extremely well. Peter Schrager at Good Morning Football and NFL Network, and Mike Tanier, like I said, at Football Outsiders and Bleacher Report, are saying, he's playing as one of the top few quarterbacks in the league. I don't know if I agree with that, and certainly statistically, there's not very good evidence for it. But there's something to be worried about, because we remember before the JBC, Jim Bob Cooter, showed up in Detroit, that they love to pass the ball deep, and they love to take time, and they love to throw it up and have 50-50 balls. A lot of that has to do with the presence of Calvin Johnson, but a lot of it had to do with hey, we've got our rifle for an arm at quarterback, let's use it. And I think they may be striking that balance now, which is kind of interesting. Maybe it's a more effective offense, but the Vikings, the more standard that offense is, the easier it is probably schematically to handle. Again, the linebackers have to play better than they did last week, but it should be an easier offense to kind of figure out, because there's fewer screens, which the Vikings have been good at stopping, but it's just fewer shifty players that they've had such difficulty in the past with.
Well, my concern is if Matt Stafford were an RTS character, he would be a tank with some striker attributes. It is difficult to finish him off. The guy can take 2 concussions in a game and never go into the tent.
Not officially.
Well, not officially, but
I know what you mean.
What a normal man would consider a concussion is just what happens to Matt Stafford in the course of a game.
Yeah, he's been proven extremely resilient. There have been games where the Vikings have laid down 7 or 8 quarterback hits, some really devastating ones. He's gotten up and he's continued to play. There was one game where he did have to get x-rays afterwards, but he's an extraordinarily resilient player, and we kind of know this from last year. 8 quarterback comebacks, fourth quarter comebacks, and a bunch of close games this year. It really seems like the Lions are never really out of it. And we haven't seen the Vikings get tested too much late in games with close scores, which is a good thing, right? Because the Vikings are therefore good.
We tend to run away with it, yes.
Yeah. But, if all of the fourth quarters feel like garbage time, what's going to happen when it's not garbage time? You kind of want... I'm not going to say you don't want the team to constantly be tested, because it means they're not putting away games, but you want more evidence that the team does a better job in 2-minute situations, so that if it does come to that in the Lions game, that they can really take care of things. For example, in this Chicago game, they were down I think 10-0 after a strip sack, and Stafford had a great performance afterwards, and they were able to get out a win, I think with 27-24. So I think some of that had to do with a missed field goal, but still good performances from the Lions, and good performances in particular from Stafford to get that done. So that's definitely something that the Vikings have to watch out for. It really feels like we don't know how the Vikings defense does in those 2-minute situations, and so it's something I'll be nervous about if that's how they enter the fourth quarter.
Well, and I have an extant concern that I don't know that there's much we can really do about that. Stafford Thor, his Thor-like resilience will lead to potential late hit penalties and the dreaded double bonus free first down and 15 yards. I feel like we might be able to give them a handful of first downs and field position just by having to send 2 people to tackle Matt Stafford.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I don't know.
Not much we can really do about it. It really depends on how they choose to call the game.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I guess adapt as the game goes on to see how they're calling it, but it's still worth hating him a bunch.
Matt Stafford. God. Hate that guy.
So resilient. What an asshole.
So you would say that the offensive line now is better equipped for run blocking than it was, or better equipped for run blocking for McKinnon and Murray now than it was in week 4, right? Because once Cook was, that really like screwed up the whole run game plan. It seemed like.
Yeah, I mean the Vikings switched to a really quick zone running scheme that created quick reads for the running back. I mean, because that's what Dalvin Cook was almost purpose built for. That kind of zone running system. And the Vikings haven't abandoned that kind of zone running, but they've simplified the reads a little bit, and they've mixed in more power and pin and pull plays that require a little bit more patience from both McKinnon and Murray. But not only that, I mean, there's been just a lot built in with how Easton's been playing. He's been playing a little bit better. Berger's playing better with Elflin. I mean, he had a not great game against the Rams, but he had a great game against Washington, his best game of the season, and he seems to be getting better. And so just generally the offensive line seems to be gelling. They seem to be doing a pretty good job creating holes for the running back. And again, like I said, I mean, Detroit Lions fans are very upset with how their own front seven is performing because, again, both sides of the line for the Lions have just been so frustrating. Their interior defense doesn't have the ability to really do much to stop the run. I think they're ranked 32nd or 31st in the NFL in defending runs up the gut. They have one of the worst run stop rates among their interior defenders and edge defenders along the defensive line. I know, I think it was Jay Reed Draft Scout was tweeting out, that, Cornelius Washington, I mentioned earlier, but the Lions edge defenders just do such a poor job of edge containing the run game that McKinnon should have a good game. And that's true. But also with how poor those linebackers have been playing, you might as well run up the middle too. It feels like the Lions have just gotten worse at run defense over the last couple of weeks, and so they should be exploitable by either McKinnon or Murray. In previous weeks, we've asked a guest like, hey, do you feel more exposed inside or outside in the run game? And just based off that question, we're like, Murray's going to have a big game or McKinnon's had a big game, and I think we're batting 100. Or 1,000 on that. And in this game,
good.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, 100's terrible.
A baseball guy, but
that's a pitcher batting. That's terrible, Arif. What are you doing? No, batting 1,000. Essentially, we're like, what are they better at? All right, that's who's going to have a good game, and that's what's happened every single time. This game, it's really difficult. I would say, again, inside runs are a little bit more vulnerable than outside runs, but there's really compelling evidence that you'd rather have McKinnon in space than Murray up the middle because you have more explosive playmaking potential, and so you're going to take the slight dip in efficiency against a team that's slightly better against outside runs. And a lot of that has to do with how good Glover Quinn as a safety is at stopping the run. But some of it has to do with just how poor the interior defensive line is and how poor those linebackers are. So, yeah, I expect the Vikings to have probably total over 150 yards rushing just because they're going to want to control the game on the ground. They don't want to throw at Darius Slay. They don't want to throw at Glover Quinn. And they've been running the ball better than ever. And so I think they're going to try and have a lot of attempts. We'll see. That's kind of aggressive. I mean, they are coming off a 175-yard game, 177-yard game on the ground, but it still feels appropriate to pick that.
Well, and your perception is that the biggest mismatch between the Vikings offense and the Lions defense is in the backfield.
Yeah, certainly. I think that just generally, and the Lions have had a problem at linebacker ever since they couldn't figure out, when Stephen Tulloch left. Who's their other great? Kevin Durant. When Kevin Durant was not going to be, not Kevin Durant, Justin Durant. Kevin Durant is a basketball player. Just mixing all the sports up.
All the sports metaphors. You should get a job at ESPN.
But when Justin Durant wasn't healthy, and they were like, well, we're probably just going to have to release him anyway. Ever since then, they just haven't been able to figure out the linebacker position. And I absolutely think that McKinnon is going to dust Davis in space. I think Davis is ranked like 83rd out of 85 linebackers in PFF.
That is
it's
not good.
Truly Chad Greenway territory.
Ooh. Don't at Arif. Okay, so hot seat. A little bit of inside gambling baseball. Would you buy half a point for? Okay, well, let me phrase it differently in a less confusing way. Would you rather have Minnesota -3 at even money or Minnesota -2.5 at -125? Like, would you pay?
Why are the odds like
half
that?
a point?
That's so weird. Yeah, I definitely have -2.5 at 1. Wouldn't it be the other way?
No, you're paying for half a point.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have the -2.5 at -125. Right?
See, I think Minnesota's going to win by significantly more than a field goal. I think I would rather have the even money.
But the way that you phrase that to me makes it seem like the payout is larger. Oh, wait, hold on.
Minus for the house, like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, the 3 at even.
Okay. I was confused why you were confused.
Good.
I did a very good job explaining it. Obviously, this is why I tend to keep this one light. So knowing that the Vikings are -3 in Detroit, even money, over under is between 44.5 and 45.5. What is your score prediction?
Interesting. So wait, that's a 23-20
victory.
Was that
25-22 or no, 24-22 would get you to 46.
Yeah, 22. That's way closer than I thought it would be. Yeah, I mean, I guess it is 3 points either way. Yeah, I guess. I'll be conservative. 24-20 for the Vikings, so just barely covering.
Now, see, I like a score more like 24-14, or maybe even 24-10. I think Detroit is going to be surprised how hard they struggle to score this game, unless it turns out that the Thanksgiving refs are willing to call lots of penalties that move the Lions downfield when it takes us approximately 9 hours to sack Matt Stafford.
I love the hedging of the score prediction. They're not going to score much unless something happens to screw the team.
Unless we.
Oh well, okay.
We're gonna roll them. We're gonna roll them hard, and they may not even win if the refs help them.
It could be 33-10 as well, and just like messing with the over/under as much as they could. I'm throwing 33-10 in there just because there's a missed extra point.
Oh no! I suddenly like James's pick the best. A missed extra point and also a short missed field goal.
Yes. That
could have capitalized on but didn't. That probably happens early in the game.
I like a missed extra point to avoid the cover on the over under.
Ooh.
Yeah, like the missed extra point keeps it at the under.
It'll be the second time in 2 weeks a poor kicking performance screwed me out of an over.
Kai Forbath is going to be involved in some point shaving scheme at the end of the season.
I mean, that's probably what he's doing. He's probably trying to take that kicker money and get rich.
Yeah, all that
turn into gold.
Exactly, all that kicker money.
Oh my gosh! So yeah, I guess that's your Lions game in a nutshell. We're going to win unless we don't.
That
cool.
is the best sentence I think that we've ever uttered on this show. They're going to win unless they don't.
Well, no, it's better than the alternative, because there have definitely been like almost whole seasons where we've been on the show and spent a long time going into very deep detail about how we're probably going to lose unless we win.
Mm-hmm.
The Norse code tradition, just very elaborate hedging.
That's all we do.
All of this it's really just a question of the quality of the hedge so that you can go and tell your friends how you're hedging on this particular matchup. Like, I mean, at the end of it, we're all just like atoms made of star stuff, and pretty soon the sun will go supernova, and then eventually the heat death of the universe will come, and none of this will.
If I was a gambling man, I was going to put down $100 that Dusty was actually going to say the phrase the eventual heat death of the universe. I was ready to put money on that.
You felt it coming because it's coming.
Speaking of the eventual heat death of the universe, no. Let's go to the mailbag.
Sorry for wrecking your transition there, James.
I
take full responsibility.
Well, get that carnivorous earwig ready. So here we go with the mailbag. Mitchell Kane asks, would it be smart or stupid to start Teddy against the Lions? Like, does the rest outweigh the lack of preparation or vice versa?
I would say it's not smart. I would like a week of practice.
Yeah. Also, if Pat Shurmur gets a head coaching gig, how should they replace him? Presumably with a human, but like, who would be our number one, like, best case scenario for an offensive coordinator?
Well, Bill Musgrave just took over at Denver, so he's off the market.
Damn. Dusty's super excited about that, by the way.
I retweeted a take from John Owning, who I think retweeted a Philadelphia Eagles, video on John DeFilippo, who I believe is their quarterbacks coach. And he was somebody that I had heard a lot about actually down at the Senior Bowl. We had heard about when there was like discussion of him and the Browns. I think he coached for the Browns a little bit, but not in a bad way. He'd be interesting. Certainly that Eagles offense is pretty good, as much as I hate it. And I think that he could probably do a pretty good job.
That Eagles offense, as much as you hate it. I'm sure we'll talk about them at some point too. Moving on.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah, not a clue. Jelly asks, would you rather be stuck on an island with Teddy's endless hope and optimism or Everson's endless humor?
If I could choose just the person, probably Teddy. But if I'm just choosing the personality trait, definitely the humor. I could not handle hope and optimism on a deserted island. I need somebody funny.
Yeah, at some point it would feel more like a Lifetime movie sort of situation. Like, no, I need to laugh. I need to at least feel something here.
Bible quotes. That's too much.
What was that?
I can't live with that many Bible quotes.
Yeah.
I got to go with Everson.
Yeah. This idiot from Ohio asked, if Case Keenum plays okay but loses one of the 3 road games coming up, I can see a loss in Carolina because that's what a hoodie would do. Do you think that it is enough to make Teddy the starter, or could you see the Vikings waiting until the 3rd road game to start Teddy?
I could see the Vikings waiting until the 3rd road game. Like I said, like if the Vikings win and Case isn't playing all that well, unless it's like very obvious, I think the Vikings are just going to stick with Keenum. I think they've already kind of indicated that.
Yeah. By the way, Dusty, we just wanted to quick mention your excitement for Bill Musgrave taking over for Denver.
Oh man, well this just makes no sense to me. Like, one of the biggest problems in Denver right now is just super soft quarterbacking. And who was their quarterbacks coach until literally today? Bill Musgrave. So
yeah, but he coached Matt Ryan.
Well, he's not coaching Matt Ryan now, and
is that like the Matt Burke he went to Harvard thing?
Yes,
it's like that. So Musgrave is not only not starting Brock Osweiler next week, he's probably going to go with Paxton Lynch. And
is Paxton healthy?
Healthy-ish.
All right.
So
let's get this awkward quarterback train going.
I just want to see that on the injury report. Healthy-ish.
It's officially known as questionable, but no. So Musgrave, like, if you thought he had a index card with a lot of plays on it in Minnesota, wait until he gets to like double the font on that same size card. He's going to have like 6 plays, and maybe 2 of them are going to be passes.
Yeah, I mean, that's how he got Adrian Peterson to the 2,000-yard season. It's all him, man.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what drives me crazy is that, like, the reportage is all about how he led the Vikings to some of the best rushing seasons of their career, which coincidentally were Adrian Peterson's, like, career seasons. CJ Anderson, no Adrian Peterson. I mean, maybe now, but not 2012 Adrian. And then they all go on to write about what a great thing he did with Derek Carr and like a relatively talented receiver core in Oakland for like 1 year.
Musgrave has done really well when gifted fantastic offensive lines.
Yeah, and so I'm really curious to see what happens when he gets neither a fantastic offensive line, nor a good quarterback, nor a good receiver core, nor a good running back.
The true test of an offensive coordinator.
I'm hopeful that he's up for it.
In other words, you're looking forward to seeing flaming note cards just thrown from the sidelines.
Yeah.
They won't be worth anything anyway.
No, just like his coaching.
Actually, we might not even need the note cards because there will be so few plays that will be in the playbook.
Yeah.
It's very streamlined offense.
I just want to see the zoom in for the Denver quarterback as he like lifts up his arm or lifts up like the patch on his arm for the plays, and you can just make out "run for your life" on there.
There'll be an orange side that says run and a blue side that says pass.
Yes. Find your tight end. Find your check down.
But we'll look for Chris Harris Jr. and then. So they think they're trying to get rid of Demaryius Thomas because they think that becoming a vegan has made him weak.
I saw that. Incredible.
I did enjoy that Brandon Marshall retweeted that out and just in like an LOL sort of situation, like that just like totally saying that has nothing to do with anything. It's like,
what's really funny is for the Denver football team, that is a very appropriate thing for the coaching staff and front office to think. But for your average like Denver resident, that's like. Okay, didn't other people write in questions?
They did. Next question is from Luke Braun, who asks, has Anthony Harris made the case to compete for starting safety job in the future? Sendejo is 30, and while the Vikings probably acquire someone else soon, has Harris earned the right to compete with that person?
I think in the offseason, I think we want to see more than 2 good games from Anthony Harris to say that he's kind of earned the job, and you don't really see sort of a safety competition in the middle of the season during practice. So when Andrew Sendejo comes back, he's been playing really well. So, this is very like Teddy case, but
you want to crown him? Crown his ass.
But I'd want to wait more than 2 games before giving Harris the benefit of the doubt.
Next question is from Kenneth Allen, who asks, does Keenum's play these last 2 weeks change Arif's assessment from his start Teddy Bridgewater piece?
Not really. I just think it's more difficult now. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I still think Teddy provides more upside and that it's better to find out now rather than later. And this is perhaps the most important game left in the schedule. And so it is, again, difficult to do it. But if I think Teddy's a better quarterback, it still makes sense for me to think that they should play him. But it's more understandable now to me why they wouldn't than a couple of weeks ago when Keenum was flashing less in terms of being able to create explosive plays.
Yeah. Next question is from Future Old Person. You'll love this one. If Case Keenum was on the Eagles, how many wins would they have?
All of them. They'd have every win.
Are you... I was going to say every win including their loss, or every win they currently have because Keenum is interchangeable with Wentz?
No. Every win.
Even the games they're not playing. They would win the bye week.
Correct. They would already be 17-0.
Super Bowl.
Is it legal to eat eagle? Like, is that the bird of choice this year?
It is not legal to eat bald eagle.
Lions, so give it a year.
We'll see. OPM asks, will the Vikings pick up Trey Wayne's fifth-year option?
That's a really good question. It's the average of the top 25 cornerback contracts instead of the average of the top 10 because he's a number 11 pick, not a top 10 pick. And so my guess is yeah, especially given how well he's been playing the past couple of weeks.
Next question is kind of a long one here. It's from Ben Glazman, who asks, when you became self-aware, explaining Latavius Murray's long runs were a result of huge creases from the O-line, do you A, enter the Twilight Zone, B, look for glitches in the simulation, C, hear waves crashing on a blissful shore while steel drums suggest another Mai Tai?
It is super weird, right? That like the offensive line is really good, and you're like, yeah, the running back is a product of the offensive line here in Minnesota.
It's so weird. It's not a thing. And watching the abomination happening for the line of the Cowboys, like left is right, up is down right now.
Yeah, right. The Vikings have a better offensive line than the Cowboys,
especially with the.
I was just gonna go with C. I wasn't gonna say that.
Yeah, but you're going to pick any answer that had Mai Tais in it.
Yeah.
Well, and shores and steel drums. I mean, that answer really spoke to me. Hopefully, I'm not even wearing shoes.
If you were wearing shoes in this sort of scenario, you were probably doing something wrong. Spicy Meatball 88 asks, can the Vikings still win the division with a loss to the Lions on Thursday?
Yeah, I think so. Because I still think that the Lions are not as settled into. I mean, they did have difficulty beating the Bears, who were one of the easier teams that were left on their schedule. And so even though the Lions have a significantly easier schedule, if the Vikings lose this one and then win out, I think that it's like, I mean, the Vikings will probably still win the division.
Well, and if the Lions win, or if the Lions lose this one, then they have to win out even to have a chance. Mm-hmm. And if the Vikings and the Lions both win out, then the Vikings are in.
Right.
Boy,
that's ludicrous.
Just looking at the game that happened tonight with the Falcons and the Seahawks. Boy, there are a lot of middling teams in the wild card right now. Which is the nature of the beast at this time of the season. But man, it's really hard to make heads or tails of some of those teams, and a couple of them you just sit there going, how are they still in contention? Like Green Bay, for example. Like, how is Green Bay still in contention right now for a wild card spot?
Where they fell apart.
Yeah,
like they're probably. I actually think the Packers and the Bears are the most forgettable teams in the NFC right now, other than maybe the Cardinals. But like, there's a lot of like junky teams that can still like screw you over really hard in one game, and so the playoff picture is just like what?
Yeah. Little odd. Next question, and I believe there's only one answer for this one, but has Case Keenum made a deal with the devil?
Yeah, of course.
No, good sir, he's on the level. That is the only correct answer for that.
My pudding can.
I will take my penknife, my good man. The only appropriate answer is the one that you can involve the monorail episode. It's the only appropriate answer. I need to shoehorn more Simpsons references into the show. I used to do a weekly Simpsons quote in the notes for the show, and I ceased to do that this year for some reason.
Well, that's on you.
That's why the quality of the show has plummeted.
That is probably it. Actually, I would not disagree with that. John on Twitter asks, Arif watching Case get away with throwing the ball into coverage and throwing behind breaking wide receivers several times. Does this mean there is no such thing as a law of averages? Or does the law of averages sometimes defer to help an average quarterback? Asking for a friend.
I mean, that's not quite how the law of averages works, but it's a fair question. We're kind of waiting for it to come back and bite us, but it hasn't. And so you kind of raise your eyebrows at like what this means in terms of the way that we trust statistics and sample sizes and averages. But both Nick Foles and Josh McCown fell back down to earth after the season was over. So I guess it still technically happens. It just sometimes it doesn't happen right away because that's how randomness works.
Blame sample size.
Exactly.
That's standard operating procedure.
Derek Brooks Samick asks, why can't the media get it through its head that Keenum is the quarterback? Why in the hell would you go back to Teddy this season?
Most of the media is pretty content with thinking that Case is the quarterback. It's everybody else who's kind of asking, what would happen if you made a quarterback change? And the reasoning is because you think that you can do even better. That's the only reason, right? Like, I think we've kind of evolved past thinking that, the way that we evaluate quarterbacks is by wins and losses. It's by how well the quarterback can in the future help you win games. And the best, example of that is not past wins. It's, a whole host of other quarterback traits and features that help them win games. And Case doesn't have sort of the full menu of that. And a lot of people think that Teddy does. But most of the media is pretty set with thinking that Case is the starter. So I don't know where this question's coming from.
Nels asks, can we ban all number 4 Favre jerseys from Vikings games? It's creepy.
No.
He was a rental, never a Viking. It's like carrying a picture of a prostitute you once met. Creepy.
Hard no.
Hard no.
It's also the greatest troll job the Vikings have ever pulled.
Yes.
Absolutely allow it.
I felt weird about it the moment that I saw my first one. I was at Cub the day after he was signed, and this was like Cub in Bloomington. And I would not have expected to see a bunch of Vikings jerseys this particular Wednesday, but there it was. I saw a number of Favre Vikings jerseys the day after he was signed. It was just you winced a little bit. Like, really, this is where we're going. But you can't ban that. We had a very successful year, and then the last year was bad. But I mean, we're not banning number 5 McNabb jerseys or anything, are we?
I mean, I think the reason that doesn't come up is because why would you wear a number 5 McNabb jersey?
I don't think anyone cares about that. But no, I'm with Arif on this one. The best reason to own a number 4 Favre jersey is to show up to the Packers game at US Bank Stadium, and look at the guy that's wearing a number 7 Favre jersey and be like, hey, nice jersey.
All right, now let's get into the food aspect of it. Let's get into Thanksgiving, and let's get into alcohol. With Jacob Cost asking, what is your number 1 favorite alcohol food pairing?
Wow, that's a tough one. But so we're going for a general Thanksgiving theme, right?
Sure.
I think an underrated beverage at Thanksgiving is white wine, or its cousin, sparkling wine.
I guess. Well, I thought about that.
It's something that you probably can't drink like a ton of and embarrass yourself. You can spill it on yourself if you do embarrass yourself, and it won't stain your clothes.
Also a positive.
It also provides generally a nice counterpoint to almost all the heavy starchy dishes that you're going to be eating that day. Like, what do you eat? What do you drink with sweet potato casserole? Oh, white wine's not terrible. What do you drink with stuffing? Oh, white wine again. What do you drink with garlic mashers? Oh, white wine. What do you drink with turkey? White wine. What do you drink with fish? White wine. It goes all the way. And you can't... one of the best things about drinking wine at a holiday is that you just have the one glass, and as long as you only hold it by the stem and just keep refilling that glass, it looks like you've only had one glass of wine the whole day.
Well, I mean, you won't look like you've only had one glass of wine.
Yeah. Is this a bit like the Always Sunny trick where they proceeded to put a bunch of red wine in the can of Coke, and they're just walking around the whole day like that? Frank was a genius.
Well, no, so you can't be the person that holds their wine glass by the bell, Because if it's dinner time and you can't see through your wine glass, then everybody knows that you've been carrying it around for a while. You have to maintain a level of decorum while drinking your one and only one glass of wine.
Yeah, maybe you do.
Yeah. So what are you pairing that with?
Everything. That was the point.
How about you, Arif?
Smoked meats and whiskey, if we're doing a Thanksgiving theme.
I could see that.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. Next up is Purple Buckeye, who I loved the debate this later created. Is Arif still clinging to his ham is better than turkey silliness?
It's not silly. Ted is just wrong. I really strongly suspect that Ted hasn't had good ham because every year, he manufactures this ham is bad take. No, I've never heard of that except from him. The only takes on my ham is better than turkey argument is just, no, turkey's really good. You just haven't had good turkey. But I've never heard anyone outside of Ted say, no, ham is bad. That's just out of control to me. He's clearly never had good ham. And I know most people, they get the spiral cut, they put it in, it gets dried out because, it's really easy for a spiral cut ham to get dried out. If you get a good roast ham and, glaze it properly with butter, it's way better than any turkey you'll ever have. But yeah, of course, because we've mentioned multiple times throughout multiple seasons of this show and on Twitter, turkey is the least of all proteins. That doesn't mean you can't have good turkey. It just means that however you prepare a turkey, the other thing that you could have prepared instead would have been better.
Yeah, and honestly, in almost every case, you can use the same preparation that you would have on the turkey, on the ham, and it'll be better.
Did you see the suggestion on Twitter of the crawfish bath?
No, that sounds amazing. What's going on?
Crawfish bath,
Is it just a crawfish boil, or are you marinating a okay?
Use the water from the crawfish boil as a marinade? Oh my gosh, if you were to somehow do what American people love to do and turn one holiday day into 2 holiday days and have a crawfish boil the day before Thanksgiving and then sous vide a turkey in the crawfish boil juice.
Oh, interesting. That could be pretty good.
So here's the suggestion. Boiled like crawfish with crab boil, onions, celery, lemons, oranges, and zatarans.
Oh, wait, so you don't... So you just boil it, as if it were a crawfish.
That appears to be what is being suggested.
No, vacuum sealer and sous vide it.
Yeah, that's way better. Definitely sous vide it. Yeah. And then you can put butter and zatarans and onions inside the sous vide bag. I don't like the idea of putting it in water because the thing with crawfish boils is that there's just not enough time for flavor to leach out. But with turkey, because it takes a long time, absolutely, what little flavor there's left in turkey would leach out. And that's, I know that, you're flavoring the water and stuff like that, but it's different. No, I think that's a bad idea.
All right, next question is from Tommy Gunn, who asks, bacon shaped in the form of a turkey. Is this quality Thanksgiving meal?
I mean, it's better than turkey? You could do better than bacon shaped in the turkey.
Do a pork side.
There you go. You can have a pork side shaped like a turkey and have it just be bacon.
Well, no, I just mean the the part of the pig that you slice the bacon from. Why would you go to all the trouble of slicing the bacon just to put it in a different shape? Why wouldn't you just cook that?
Just have pork belly? Yeah, agreed.
Final question is from Kenneth Allen, who asks, what type of restaurant should I go to on Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving food is boring as hell, so I was thinking something else. Christmas has Chinese, Thanksgiving has blank.
You'd have to find one that's open. I mean, that's the whole point, or that's the whole genesis of the Christmas and Chinese food thing. What's going to be open? I think Indian food would be deliciously ironic. Just think about it for a second. Yeah,
It takes a second, but it's there.
It doesn't take that long, but there's no better answer for every possible reason. For deliciousness reasons, for irony reasons, for likely to be open on Thanksgiving reasons. You can't go wrong with Indian food, which is actually a statement that is not only true on Thanksgiving.
Yes. Although I do find that there are pizza places open during the evening of Thanksgiving after everyone's had their food. If they leave and go home and everything, there are some pizza places that are open. So it's not like there's not like options available, but I do find there are a few pizza places that are open after like a certain hour on Thanksgiving, and you can't feel too bad about it, about ordering it.
Well, I can't speak to Minneapolis, but I can tell you that the Denver area, even just over the last few years, has developed more of a restaurant scene that exists to serve kind of other people in the scene. So like for all the poor suckers that are stuck working retail on Thanksgiving, there'll be some tasty late night food and some cool bars open. For all those that are stuck working at restaurants on Thanksgiving, then, there'll be some cool late night food and bars open. So I can't, like I said, I can't speak to Minneapolis, but if you live in a city of sufficiently large enough provenance to where there's going to be hungry people that were like slaving away at Walmart or whatever, find the places that are catering to them.
Well, that's going to be it for this. What are you guys cooking this weekend?
This is the first year that Chelsea and I haven't really put together a whole Thanksgiving plan, because our Thanksgiving plans just in general have gone a little bit off kilter. I mean, we had a friend who scheduled Thanksgiving, Friendsgiving, at the same time that Chelsea and I have like a family function, and the nature of the family function is that we don't like bring anything. So we don't have anything planned, but I assume at some point for that Friendsgiving, we're going to try our hand at a dessert. And it's not something that we typically make all that often. So we'll see what happens, but I think we're going to have to wing it a little bit. Maybe I saw a really good and I know this sounds really dumb because people have strong opinions on it, but pumpkin pie thing on YouTube from Bon Appetit. But the difference is that it's like an eggier, custardier, more flavory pumpkin pie filling that on top is bruleed, which that sounds super fun. So maybe we'll do something like that. Who knows?
So one of my terrible TV addictions is the Great British Baking Show.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Yes.
So have you been watching season 4? Did you see the guy do the pumpkin meringue pie?
No, but ooh, I'm excited.
There you go. And he does his meringue. He does like a very stiff French meringue and just like pours it on cold and blow torches the top of it. So it's like pretty and peaky and crispy on top and still like airy and custardy in the middle. Paul Hollywood was not that impressed, but if I did not already know what we were going to bring to our Friendsgiving, then that's what I'd be doing.
All right, sold.
Nice. I have a double Thanksgiving I'm going to be doing that day. So
oh gosh, same day. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get to have dinner at 2:00 and 7:00.
Basically. Yeah.
Basically. Oh God.
So I have 2 Thanksgivings that I'm going to be a part of. And so the first one, they're doing like a smaller like Thanksgiving thing. So, but I've been asked to bring the brisket I make. So I'll be doing roasting a brisket for several hours and making my apartment smell amazing. And then afterwards I'll be coming back and a few people will be coming over here for an actual like Thanksgiving turkey thing. And, I've been messing around with stuffing lately because I wanted to impress a couple people. So I ended up making this stuffing a few days ago that was from scratch. Had had the King's Hawaiian roll and then like Italian sausage, cranberries inside of it, I forget if it was like chopped walnuts and a couple other things in there, and it was really, really, really good. You just have to be careful on the mushy aspect of it. But I think I'm going to be like, that'll be the thing I'm proud of during that evening, because I do like turkey, but that's not something I will like claim as, oh, I did that, I cooked that. But I'll definitely claim the hell out of the stuffing if it works out.
King's Hawaiian rolls, you can definitely like dry them out in a low oven, but isn't it kind of like, pardon my French, but isn't it kind of fucked up to invite people over to a Thanksgiving in a place that smells like you just cooked brisket in it and they can eat?
If I have anything left, I will throw it at the kids.
Thanksgiving, you get turkey. Sorry.
I have a feeling that the smell of turkey and everything else will take over for it, but I also live in an apartment complex, so like the smells going on and the number of curry smells I smell on a daily basis walking through the halls here would lead me to believe that there's going to be some potent cooking like scents happening throughout the day. So
sounds delightful.
It's not bad. I'm not complaining about it. I enjoy that sort of thing. So they had an international week on campus where I work, and there was an Indian. There was like an Indian table, a guy who's actually from India who's giving all this Indian food to a bunch of northern Minnesota people who've never tasted it before. And I basically just parked in front of his table and was like, okay, I'll have that, and I'll be back in like 5 minutes for the rest of this.
Don't let anyone eat all of this, because I'm going to be back.
No, I will be back for the kebab. I will be back for the tikka masala. So just like keep this coming. It'll be fine. I'm starving because they don't have an Indian food and they don't have an Indian restaurant in Grand Forks. Still, I have to drive to Fargo for that sort of thing.
Really?
Yeah, they still don't. Actually, a restaurant in Forks has started to do an Indian night. They just had their first one. I think they're making it a monthly thing, but that's it.
So stupid.
Yeah, so I'm gonna like load up on it when I come to Minneapolis this weekend, and just like.
Since college, like literally 30 years now, Grand Forks would kill it with a small, delicious Indian place with a tandoori. But whatever,
that is neither here nor there.
So we go up into the mountains to a friend of ours. Her uncle hosts like a giant Friendsgiving on his property. He has a place with a big. It ends up being like 40 people. And so they do there are multiple like chefs that, hang out there. So they do like a turkey competition every year. And so they'll end up being like turkey 10 ways. And what actually won the kind, we all do a secret ballot like during dinner and vote on who wins. And there's actually like a turkey crown that gets passed along from year to year.
Is it made of turkey bones? Because I kind of want it to be made of turkey bones.
No, it's made of cheap velour. The chef who we are, friends with that, brought us up there because we're pathetic in need of Friendsgiving. She ended up winning last year by doing roast duck, which if that doesn't tell you anything about how good turkey is, then I don't know what else to tell you. So last year we brought up macaroon, but we made them in like the shapes of turkey legs and like whole turkeys, which it turns out was actually relatively easy to do with like, you just have to put it in piping bags with like 2 different sizes, and you have like little white pipes for the crown roast style ends for like the bone ends, and then like brown pipes for the rest of it.
I remember you complaining about doing that last year. I don't remember that it working out. I just remember you complaining quite a bit about doing it last year. Or maybe it was just the repetitive nature of it.
There were we had a lot of breaks because we were in a super big hurry, but we're going to give ourselves a little more time this year. They were a huge hit at the party. In fact, a couple of people asked us if they could write in turkey macarons as their favorite turkey. Not enough to affect the voting, but everybody liked those so much. And it seems like most people don't really bring desserts to this Thanksgiving, which is like the opposite of every Thanksgiving I've ever been to. So we're probably just going to re-execute the turkey macaron.
Well, all right.
Nice thing. Best way to make a turkey, sous vide, spatchcock, fried.
Those are rankings, right? Not like an order of instructions.
no, those are instructions. Then
you cook it to like 160, and then you fry the sous vide turkey with whatever spices you want.
Wait, why would you sous vide it to 160 and then cook it to 160?
Well, you cook it because the inside is cooked, and then you just like fry it till it's crispy.
Right. So then there's no reason to do the spatchcocking.
Well, I guess maybe you could debone it instead, which is basically the same.
Right. Anyway, that rank order is good. I actually do think that smoking is better than frying, but it's close either way.
Well, but I've said smoking every year until now, so I wanted to switch it up.
Well, it's fine. But I mean, like, you still had sous vide 1 and spatchcock 2, so it's not like... It's fine. You know, it's fine. It's fine.
No one's
also fine.
No one's judging.
Smoked turkey, you should definitely try that this year. And if you are listening to this episode and you are not already thawing your turkey, you're already too late. Start doing it right now. Like, pull your car over and start thawing your turkey. Seriously.
just get a tub.
You know what? You're right. You're fine. Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
It's like Tuesday morning at the earliest, and it takes probably a good 18 hours for these like 20-pound monster turkeys to thaw.
The best thawing method is moving cold water because it has the best heat transfer without, cooking your food.
Also true.
All right, Arif, anything to plug before we go?
I'll probably write a piece on Trey Waynes. I mean, he's been doing real good.
I like that. I like the answer to that every week. It's he doesn't suck. We should probably talk about him.
Yeah, we should bring that up.
We'll spend a little bit talking about how much fun he has in the run game. It'll be fine. So that is going to be it for this week. We are off for the rest of the week. Please enjoy the holidays. We will be back next week to talk about the Lions game and also preview the next game. So that is going to be it. So for Arif, for Dusty, my name is James. Thank you so much for listening. And demand excellence. Demand Norse code. Happy Thanksgiving.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.